Go.
What do you consider your first big break in music?
My first big break in music was probably meeting. I was signed at 15 to be another Frankie Avalon, Fabian, 50 Dick Clark kind of artist, and that didn't happen. And then I was signed at 18 with Paul Simon, and when they were Tom and Jerry, when Artie and Paul were Tom and Jerry, and had Hey Schoolgirl in the second row. And then I met Charles Koppelman in '62, who was working for Donnie Kirshner, Charles Koppelman, who became the chairman of the board of EMI International, and I think right now he's the chairman of the board of Martha Stewart, but he's the one who made the bid to buy BMG for $1.5 billion and was beat out by Sony. But Charles basically met me in a snack bar, and I had just done a demo, and he said to come in to meet Donnie, and they signed me as a writer to Screen Gems Music. And if you know anything about music, we were the Brill Building crowd. And if there was 12 BMI awards in America, we were always fighting Motown for the most BMI and the most played records of the year. So I don't know, within 6 months I had about 4 songs in the top 20 in Billboard and around the world. So it just sort of took off right away in 1962. And by '63, I was vice president of Mercury and signed Wild Thing, and I signed Walk Away Renee and Sunny by Bobby Hebb, and then I had a hit with the Pied Piper and toured. I don't know, that was the start. Charles Koppelman and Don Rubin, and signing the Loving Spoonful and groups like that. And with all the action, I was on about 100 albums by the time I was 23 or 22 as a writer. So I started as a writer.
Tell us about a typical day at the Brill Building. It must have been an exciting workplace to go to every day.
Well, yeah, because I was a total music freak, and I read every magazine and knew who wrote every song. And then, I knew Goffin and King, and I knew Mann and Weil and Lieber and Stoller, and all of a sudden I was writing with all these people. And it was just, you get up. I think I signed for $75 a week advance against royalties. But just to be with these writers and to work with them, and to really, my dad was a New York City policeman, and just to be writing with the people that I had read about and whose records I had bought, and artists that I had watched on TV, and was sort of like a fan of. All of a sudden I was writing with Brian Wilson and Jan Berry from Jan and Dean, and doing Beach Boys stuff, and it was just fantastic. It was wonderful. I was always in shock that I was even, considered equal in that crowd, but I got to the point where, I was, because I was writing with them and they were asking to write with me, so it was great. It was like a dream. It's a kid's dream.
Do you remember that initial thrill of having a song of yours make the charts?
Yeah, I think the first one I wrote with Jan from Jan and Dean, and it was the follow-up to My Boyfriend's Back, and it was called, I think it was called I Adore Him. And it went to number 11 in America. It didn't go to number 1. Jan and I always thought if they would have followed our demo, they probably would have gone to number 1, because we didn't like the record they did. FGG, they went out and did I Want Candy as the three of them. FGG, Feldman, Goldstein, and Goddard, and I had gone to college with one of them. So, after beating out Goffin and King and Mann and Weil and Jeff Barry and Ellie Greenwich, landing that first record and beating out the bigger writers, and it was great. It was just great hearing something on the radio, that I wrote, and I was just honored. I just thought I was blessed. I was in shock, basically. I'm just a Bobby's son from New York.
How do you look back on that time with Jan Berry? You did co-write a lot of stuff with him. How do you look back on that time in terms of your development as a songwriter?
Well, I think before they put me with Screen Gems, Donnie Kirshner, the Kirshner Rock Concert, he was the president, and I think the writing with Goffin and King, and Mann and Weil, writing songs on trying to go for the caliber of You've Lost That Love and Feeling, and You're On My Soul and My Life's Inspiration, and it was just, I don't know, I was sort of, I couldn't really believe that that the dream was actually coming true for me musically. And at the same time, I had fallen in love with she's no longer with us in this plane. She's gone on to other worlds. But it was like two kids in this dream world, and all of a sudden, it seemed like within a snap of a finger, I was the vice president of Mercury Records at like 22, and like in charge of A&R. And I signed Wild Thing and Walk Away Renee and Sunny by Bobby Hebb, and it was weird because it stopped me from writing. But I was already on about 110 albums and had about 65 songs that charted, and 3 or 4 number ones, and about 10, 15 top 20s. And I guess I progressed into being an executive and signing acts and producing them. You make that jump from producing demos to producing masters, with budgets and everything. It was like amazing.
When you
When
you were put into that executive role at such a young age, were you given a specific role?
Yeah, I was I think the headline in Cashbox said Capitol appoints Kornfeld as first vice president of rock at any label. So I was actually the first vice president. It was in the early '60s or mid. Yeah, it was in the mid '60s, and I guess I was the first person that rock and roll was just coming in, and FM radio was just starting to happen, and it was sort of all of a sudden I was like the first door that was open, and I was there. I ran the East Coast for Capitol, and I had no budgetary limits, and I could sign whoever I wanted. So I signed Debbie Harry before she was Blondie in a group called The Wind and the Willows, and I signed Bert Summer, who played Woodstock, who does that great version of America that Paul Simon said was better than his, that I produced, and got to sign a lot of good artists. Helped sign the band, and Bob Seger, and Joe South for the games people play. It was really wonderful, and it was really sort of interesting that I wound up being such a rock and roll baby. All of a sudden I'm running the hottest company, because the Beatles, we just released the Beatles too just before that.
That's right.
So all of a sudden there I was with all these great musicians coming to me, and they were the first rock musicians. Or at least I was the first person that said, "Hey, my door's open," so I saw everybody. I didn't turn anybody down. It was always open door.
So I guess it was your role to bring the label into the rock and roll era. Did you come across any opposition from the old guard within the company?
No, some resentment because of my relationship with the president of the company, Alan Livingston. I think the resentment that I had such an open-ended contract where basically, except for like Angelina Jolie's grandfather, Carl Ingerman, who later went on to manage the Osmond Brothers, which I did turn down producing, by the way. I didn't want to produce the Osmond Brothers after doing the Cowsills and the in the Park. I didn't want any more kids groups, but no, there was no opposition because I had no budgetary limits in my contract. It was very unusual because there wasn't how many acts I could sign. It wasn't what budget I had. It was sort of left just open, and they never really stopped me. They never turned down anything because it seemed like nobody really had the right. Alan set it up that way that no one really above me had the right, like the senior vice president, Carl. Nobody really ever said, "Artie, you can't sign anything." It's if I signed an act, if I said yes, that meant there was a deal.
Do you think having been on the artistic side of the music industry beforehand helped you in your executive role in terms of communicating with the artists?
Well, being a musician and a writer, I had no problem. The problem I still have is I consider a lot of the executives criminals because they never wrote a song, especially now. They never wrote a song, they never toured, they never produced a record, and they're basically shoe salesmen that sign acts and automatically say, well, you're going to be another Destiny's Child or you're going to be another Justin Timberlake, and there doesn't seem to be the adventuresome spirit. It's just follow the formula that sells instead of let's create good music. Let's make money, and very rarely do you hear let's make great music. And I don't like that particularly, no.
So, Artie, does a day ever go by where you're not asked about the Woodstock Festival?
No, Amber. No. How many times, you mean? I just got back from producing 15 days in a row in Philadelphia at a band that the oldest member is 20, and they're going to happen. They're called Far Off Place, and they're incredible. And I wrote one song with them, that I think turned out very well. And there's already interest. And what was the question?
Does a day ever go by where you're not asked about the festival?
Woodstock?
Yeah.
No, never. It got to the point where when my wife passed away and moving to Los Angeles, and where it helped my career, because when my daughter passed away after my wife, I didn't want to write and produce, and I had just done Eye of the Tiger. I managed Survivor right through Eye of the Tiger, and after that, it's like when my daughter died, I started to promote, so I became like one of the top promoters of records, and never paid off the station. They would just, all I would, it started really out as though, every program director wanted to talk to me because they wanted a Woodstock interview. And I made a lot of good friends, and they last to this day. And no, I tend to keep away from parties because they ask questions that just lead me to a point where, if I answer them, I'm going to sound like a total egotist. Because when I talk about John Lennon, I talk about him as a friend, not to impress anybody. Or if I talk about my studio band that because Steve Gadd and Tony Levin from King Crimson, their first album was the Artie Kornfeld Tree, one of my solo albums. So it's, people ask you, and then you really got to watch it because you don't want to seem like you're egoing out. But they're actually more into Woodstock than I am. I was into Woodstock when we were doing it, and there are some bitter memories of Woodstock too. The fact that my ex-partners did Woodstock 2 and 3, I hated them for that because I thought it was a mockery of what Woodstock stood for. I wouldn't do it. They paid me not to compete against them, because I was the only one who did the promotion. Michael did the staging, I did the promotion, and Joel and John put up the first couple 100,000. But, I was really into stopping the war in Vietnam, and I was also into getting rid of Richard Nixon. And, I resigned from Capitol. I was probably in line to be the next president. Probably by 27, I would have been president of the Capitol, and I didn't really want to do that either. So, no, it's weird. If you go to a party and which I don't, if there's more than 6 people that I don't know, I don't go. But you can't help but share it because it's so important to people, and it means so much to them, and it really means so much to me inside of my soul. What it represents to me is I was part of that crowd too. Because I made the movie deal 2 days before, and I had already made the record deal, and I did the promotion. So Michael had to, run the staging and all that stuff when we got there. But I got to go through Woodstock, hanging with Garcia and my friends, and going in the crowd, and because I had to get everybody to sign a release, when they went on stage, because the movie was my baby, it was really a freak deal. When I was at Mercury, if Freddie Weintraub on the bitter end hadn't come to me with an act, and I hadn't produced an act from Canada called Leon Bibb, who I produced for Mercury as a favor, and he had just happened to become president of Warner Brothers Films the week before Woodstock, and everybody had turned that movie down, and I didn't even try to sell it. And I just went to him on my way up to Woodstock, and I guess because he was my friend, I just said, Freddie, I need $100,000 for film. I got this guy Wadley up there who I don't even know, and this guy Scorsese who's going to edit with him. It was Scorsese's first gig, and it's I guess people, to get back to the original question, I hate the questions, but I love them too, because the love, the respect, and the adulation is hard to deal with, but the love of what it represented I'm so proud of.
You recently...
it's cool, it's cool. It's part of the price you have to pay,
Yeah.
You gotta share. You can't keep it if you don't give it away,
You did recently put out a book on the festival from your perspective. How big a task was that for you to tackle that?
Oh, it was nothing. I just sat there and was interviewed, and didn't really try to sell it. I was really shocked when the site got I think it's up to 100,000 hits, and I really haven't been selling the book because it's really hard to buy. because I have a new book coming out that really takes in the Brill Building and really what happened in Woodstock. That was just a light trip of what it felt like from the day Michael walked into my office, you know, and the night it came up in my apartment in New York, the idea, right through, you know, the end of it and the aftermath and the arguments between the four partners for control of the company. You know, so, but that's also on Woodstock, you know, what happened. That, you know, I tend to, you know, even though it irritates me because it was not ethical what took place and how Warner Brothers, manipulated things. It's okay, you know. It's like it's nice to make history, and you know, I like when Time Magazine didn't say it was a music event. They said it was the greatest peaceful event in the history, man-made peaceful event in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
And I was proud to have any part because I never thought of myself as anything more than a shaman or a channel. Anyway, I didn't think it emanated from in my mind. I think I was just chosen to be, you know, Michael and I were chosen to, like, carry on this message. And we did, you know, we had no choice. I had to resign from Capitol. I had no choice.
Can you pinpoint a particular moment in time when it became apparent to you that this was going to be more than just a music festival? But
the night we thought about it.
Really?
Because I do have that ability, like when I signed the councils and they were kids and everybody said that's when they, I mean, I'm very ethical. When Mercury dropped the councils, I quit as director of A&R. And I was coming off Wild Thing and Walk Away Renee and Sunny. I just had 3 hits in a row. And when they dropped the councils, I quit, and I said, if I write the song, they're going to be #1 in the world. And then I saw her sitting in the park. I wrote I Love the Flower Girl, The Rain in the Park, and other things. And it went to #1 after the Ed Sullivan Show. And I seem to have always had that gift to see a little ahead in time. And honestly, that night, when Michael was just my late wife, Michael and I, at 3 in the morning, you know, shooting bumper pool in whatever state of mind we were in. And, you know, Michael teasing me about, you know, since I've been in the business so many years, not going and toured, you know, and not going to shows anymore, and I don't go out to see acts anymore. And me just saying, well, what if we took a Broadway theater and just could have everybody just invite our friends for free? And then Michael saying, well, I worked on the show in Miami and Hendrix is going to play, and it never really came off. And what if we took it to a farm? And then we pictured it, and, you know, Michael said, I bet 50,000 people would show up, or 100, and I said probably 300, and my late wife said, I bet there'd be 500,000. So when I stood on the stage for the first time and looked out, it was the day before Michael knocked on my trailer and he said Crombine, because he calls me Crombine. I call him Clang because he clangs my head. And I love him, but he clangs my head. And he said, you won't believe it. And there was 75,000 people out there like a day and a half before it was going to open.
Good God.
And then when I got up on stage and saw the actual people, and it was over 500,000, it was like it was just a flashback to 8 months before. Because we really did. I mean, I don't know about Michael, but Linda and I definitely saw what was going to be. There was no way. I mean, it wasn't an accident. I mean, I did travel the whole United States to that's how I started to represent Abby Hoffman and, you know, and help run benefits for Timothy Leary and, you know, and hang with Jerry Garcia. Because I went from, like, this music thing into part of the underground. I mean, I was not a hippie before Woodstock. You know, and all of a sudden I was in the center of a culture that I was just learning.
Now, it wasn't always going to be on the site that it ended up on the festival?
No. I had a staff, and, you know, it's always left out because I sort of backed out. It didn't really try to take credit because I'm happy when I hear the Pied Piper on the radio. I get a kick. You know, that's my big kick. When I see Woodstock on TV, it's hard to watch sometimes. You know, I don't know why. And maybe it's a hang-up that's developed over, you know, 39 years and like 10,000 interviews or whatever it is. I don't know. Well, so many thoughts come into my mind, you know, they cross.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I got to enjoy it, you know. I got the people there. I had a staff of 14. I wrote every word in the advertisements, and then I ran that ad because I had a feeling that it wasn't like hippies that were going to come to Woodstock, I was upper middle class kids. So I ran an ad. I didn't ask my partners. I ran on my wedding anniversary because I ran the promotion side. Michael ran the production on the stage, and we booked the acts. And Joel and John just sort of just hassled us all the time about money. And I just ran an ad to see, and I put that coupon in, and within a week we had 1,500,000 and 100,000 tickets, and all we had booked was Sly Stone and a couple of acts. We didn't even have a full card, and they all came from where I thought they would come, from upper middle class families. They didn't come from the Haight-Ashburys. They didn't come from Greenwich Village. They came from average American families. And then I knew where to go with my radio advertising because I was very close to radio, being a writer and a performer all those years. So I knew the program directors, and I just wrote what they should say and say it the way you have to say it. But I really got into figuring out, saying, okay, there you are in Australia, and you're going to be at the beach at 8 in the morning, and you're going to set your blankets out, and you're going to turn your radio on at 9. So I booked Melbourne if I would, for 9 o'clock. I want 2 minutes of advertising, and I did that in every city in the United States individually. Just figured out when people would be in their car that I wanted to get to, and then I went on the road and cooled out all the revolutionary groups, the Black Panthers, SDS, and basically just made deals that will provide medical help, will provide legal assistance, we'll make sure there's food if there's no food, and we'll protect everybody who's there, and the vibe will carry it, and actually got the Abby Hoffmans of that generation on our side. So they wanted it to happen too, because it was a blatant political statement, and people, unless you thought up the idea and knew what was behind it. I don't know what Michael's idea was. I just know what my idea was, is that I didn't like the war in Vietnam, and I didn't like friends of mine being killed, and I didn't like what Richard Nixon was doing in Watergate, and I just didn't like what was going on. So I felt a peaceful event based behind music was the way to do it.
Do you have much to do with Max Yazda, the man whose property was used for the festival?
No, there's a phony story about it by this guy who owned a motel who writes all the books, Elliot Tybert. Actually, what he did is he owned the motel where we kept our acts. The way it really went down is Michael, Joel, and John, since I was keeping away from that, Michael, okay, you secure a site, and you start getting a crew together to build and get Chipmunk in to do the lighting, because he does a great job. And I knew Bill Hanley, and I knew he was the best sound guy because I knew him from studio work. And it was sort of like, give me the question again, because I drift on Woodstock.
We're talking about Max Yazga.
Oh, Max, yeah. My cousin lived in a building in Manhattan where I lived, and she had a neighbor, and his uncle was Max Yazga. And my rendition, which is actually, I really believe is a truthful rendition, is Michael called me when they booked this site in Walk Hill, and I went up and saw it, and I said, I got bad feelings, Michael, about this place. And they went ahead and started and built the site anyway without getting the permits properly. And Michael called me giggling and laughing, because, Michael had nothing on the line. And then I got this call from this guy who was like from out of heaven or something, and he said my uncle is going to lose his farm, and he needs like $60,000 or whatever the figure was. And I called Michael and said, this guy just came over, this interior designer. He came to my apartment, told me about his uncle. I called his uncle, and I said, Michael, I think you should meet with this guy because he says he has a farm in White Lake, Bethel, in the Kingston area, and that he's willing to to deal. So then, Michael, Joel, and John went up and secured it. What happened was it really stretched us because I had to re-advertise. Michael had to rebuild the stage. I wound up going 60% over budget. Michael wound up going 600% over budget because I had to establish that this was really real because it was questionable to everybody whether it would happen anyway. And once that site was lost, it took some credibility away. But it just seemed that people wanted it to happen. I mean, I think everybody who came there had as much to do with it as I did, definitely. There was no one in that audience that I didn't feel a part of. I didn't feel any different. I mean, I like the fact that I can go anywhere and do whatever I wanted to. That was fun. Because to me, I'm a rock fan. You know, it was heaven for me. I got to see all the acts I loved.
I can only imagine the chaos the late change of site must have caused. It must have been frantic rearranging everything.
Well, you know, that was for Michael. All I did is just went back to my radio stations and said, new site for Woodstock, you know, and just kept positive. Just kept it positive.
Who were some of the names that were approached to play at the festival but for one reason or another didn't?
Well, there were people that wanted to play that we didn't want. So, you know, like we didn't want the Doors. Because Morrison had just had too much exposure at that point in a concert he did in Miami. And,
yes.
You know, there were acts. There were some friends, like, you know, like guys like, I brought the Hollies over the first time they came to America to do a show because I was producing that blonde group from England, the Hullabaloos. And so I did a show in New York with the Hullabaloos and the Hollies. So I knew Graham, and I knew David and Stephen and Neil. And, you know, there were a lot of friends because I had the Spoonful, you know, and John Sebastian was a friend. And, you know, there was just no more space for any more acts. The only acts I pushed for was Michael didn't want Joe Cocker and Denny Cordell and Chris Blackwell and I think Bramson. I'm not sure. But it was Denny Cordell who, you know, owned Shelter Records, you know, asked me as a favor because we were friends, we were mates, and, you know, so I forced Cocker in for Jerry Moss because it was through A&M, and I love Jerry Moss. And I only pushed a couple of acts in, like Melanie, and I thought Shana Na would be fun because it was retro, back to the 50s, mm-hmm. You know, and there were acts like... you know, like Iron Butterfly, and even though Mike Panera turned out to be a friend of mine later, when he did Ride Captain Ride, and I managed him for about 4 years, there were acts I wanted to play, but we only had so much space. As it was, it ran a day over anyway.
Well, that's right, yeah.
You know, but I think that was because of, you know, the rain, and, I mean, the rain was all part of it, God. Woodstock wouldn't be Woodstock if people didn't drown and almost burned to death. You know, and here we are dropping rice out of helicopters, you know. It was, you know, it was really, to use an expression, it was very trippy. You know, when you got there, you were there. And, you know, it was funny because I had never taken a psychedelic, and I was dosed at Woodstock, and I saw the disaster. I mean, I saw people getting shot and the National Guard dropping down and the stage burning up. You know, I was sitting on Robbie Robinson's amp because, you know, I was close with the band because I helped sign them to Capitol.
Yeah.
And they were friends of mine, and Albert Grossman, their manager, who managed Dylan. Yeah, the disappointment was Dylan because I really think everybody always believed it was Dylan's concert. And when Bob refused to leave his house, we had a helicopter in his lawn, and he was only 5 minutes away. And then all of a sudden, he said he was coming, and then he said his kid had the flu. But Dylan, one of the few people that I could be around Neil Young. When I was friends with John Lennon, it was no big deal to me because we were friends, you know. And for some reason, around Bob Dylan, I always get nervous. And I think he's sort of shy, and I think he was frightened.
Yeah.
You know, and I would have liked Dylan to come. You know, it was really, in my mind, it was always, since it had the Woodstock name, and he was the first big artist to move up there.
That's right.
When it became a music colony, I really felt Bob Dylan, you know, should have been there at Woodstock. That would have been, to me, that would have been the icing. Well, what happened is I made the deal. The only signature on that deal, it's a handwritten deal that's signed 2 days before. On the way up, I had my limousine stop at Warner's. I read that Freddie Weintraub had been made president. And when I had the Cow Souls, Ted Ashley was my agency, and Ashley was the chairman of the board. And I asked them both if they would meet with me, and they were friends. They said yes, because they already knew me for 15 years. And because I had acts in the bitter end, I played the bitter end myself. And when Freddie owned it. And it was a handwritten contract overnight, and we just flew Wadley in so he would sign the thing that he would direct and do this and that and make a deal with him. And the only problem, it was up to me, and that's why in the movie, lots of times, you see me with Aldo Guthrie, or you see me with so-and-so, because their deal was, anybody who performed would get 50% more of their performance fee just to be shot in the movie. And of course, since we had no gate, we had no money to even pay the performance fee. So I did have a bit of a tussle with Pete Townsend, but he signed, the only one who wouldn't sign, and he was a friend of mine. We had the same attorney, and I knew him before he had, was Richie Havens. And that's why, if you notice in the movie, all the shots of Richie Havens are up his nose from the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's because he didn't sign the release, and he didn't want to be shot. So Michael Wildley just held the camera down at his knees and just shot up at the stage. And Richie never knew he was being shot. Meanwhile, that movie added about 30 years of longevity to his career because he's still going out performing 5 days a week. And I love Richie. He's hard not to love, Richie Havens. He's a sweetheart.
After Woodstock, there were many attempts by others to put on similar type events, but none really achieved the same type of.
Well, I
vibe.
thought that Michael and I mean, Joel and John even wrote it was always Artie and Michael against John and I, and their book Bath and Babylon is so warped and twisted. In my opinion is exactly what happened. I mean, I know it, and Warner Brothers, we were supposed to take control. Since I made the deal, Michael and I really were the producers of the Woodstock movie with Joel and John. Woodstock Ventures produced the movie. Warner's knew that if Michael and I got control of the movie, the deal I negotiated was 50% of gross, period, because I had already advertised. I did the advertising, and I knew what was coming, and I knew the movie would never have to be advertised, not a penny would have to be spent, because I always knew that the festival was going to be international news, and it was going to be a historical event. I always knew it from the night we thought of it, and Warner Brothers knew that, and when I went to Warner Brothers, they said, well, we have to stay neutral. And then the night Michael and I were going to sign a deal to where we would take over control and get Joel and John back within X number of days. We had raised $1 million with Albert Grossman, who managed Dylan, who was a good friend, and Artie Ripple, who owned Kamasutra Buddha, and ourselves. We had raised $1 million, and we were $1.4 million in debt when it was all over. And when the night we came to sign the paper that they agreed to, they said no, unless you sell to us tonight for X number of dollars, we're gonna since the father showed up, and that was Block Pharmaceutical, they made things that held false teeth in and stuff. They were very wealthy kids, and Michael and I came from in a very lower middle class neighborhood in Brooklyn, so we came from different places. They came from the upper digs, and they knew if Michael and I kept control that it would have been a different movie. And they also knew that they'd probably lose about $100 million because the deal that I negotiated myself, and it was handwritten, was that it would be 50-50 split. And when Joel and John got control that night, because they said, if you don't sell, we're not going to pay any of the acts, we're not going to pay any of your people, and it's going to really ruin your name, and it's going to... And I didn't really care because I had my writing career, and Michael wanted to take the deal, and I just said, well, since I was supporting everybody for those couple of months that this fight was going on, and I was really depleting. I'd gone through probably $250,000 of my own money. I just said, well, let it go. And that way Warner Brothers just bought out Joel and John for $1.4 million. All they wanted was the money they were in debt over a 20-year period or something. I don't know what the deal was. So, and then we found out afterwards, and it was our contention, and it's been written up that it was a conspiracy, because we found out that John Roberts' brother was best friends with one of the board of directors at Warner's, and they had been negotiating the whole time. So it was sort of a setup, but, for some reason, I knew I was letting go of, being worth an extra $25 million, just, and also making the movie a lot better than it would have been, because I wouldn't have had the stupid stuff in. I would have had more of what sociologically happened.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been a rock concert movie. It would have been what happened in the times more. There would have been shots of Vietnam. There would have been shots of, Nixon. There would have been shots of how people became hippies, why people, wanted to not be like our parents anymore. We were the first generation to really say, let's break away and not do just what our parents say we should do. And it would have showed more of that. It might have not grossed as much, but I think it would have been a more artistic and a much better movie. And and it was strictly money. If they push Michael and I out, they make $50 million more. So the Woodstock movie is now over $250 million. So basically, Michael and I would have got $125 million if they would have honored the contract that night. And they was really stupid because they sold for $1.4 million. They just wanted to get the money back. And when they did Woodstock 2 and 3, Michael called me crying. You have to be there, And my daughter had just died, so for some reason I got a phobia. I couldn't fly, so they got me a luxury train car to go cross country from California, from L.A. to New York, and put me up in a hotel, and I was there at the concert, and then the next day, the Daily News reviewed me, and it was funny. It was the Sage of Aquarius reviews Woodstock, and two, and I just said it was a good concert. Anything that's sponsored by Pepsi-Cola can't be a Woodstock. And Polygram Records. God, you have a record company, and you have a major corporation sponsoring Woodstock. Putting up the money. It couldn't work.
No.
And when we did the first one, each day everything was planned. This is a folk day, this is a transition day with Grateful Dead kind of artists, and this is The Who and Balls to the Wall rock and roll, with The Who and Alvin Lee, who I love, by the way, and then closing with Hendrix. And all they did is they just went down the charts and booked everybody. And the only one I really the only thing I had to do is I said, there's a new act happening, Green Day, that I knew about it because I'm a songwriter and a record producer. They didn't know anything about it. And I just said, this act, Green Day's about to happen. I think you should put him in. So Michael said, okay, I'll put him in. I didn't even know the group or the manager. I just thought they should be in because I heard their record. I said, and so they put him on the second stage, and that sort of broke Green Day. I was even in the mud fight they had. I was on the side of Green Day on stage throwing mud at the crowd. It was fun, So I just enjoyed Woodstock, too, and I thought it was, they gave me the luxury motel room across the street with them, like I was a partner, and I really was embarrassed by it, and Woodstock 3 totally embarrassed me. Because I couldn't believe when they went back to do a third after losing. I think they lost $75 million on the two of them. And they try to shoot movies again. And, I can't write Dead Man's Curve over again with Brian Wilson. I can't do that. I can't write The Pied Piper over again. Those are magic moments. They happen. Right. Woodstock was a magic, cosmic moment. You can't copy that. It comes from a power much higher than us. Whatever your higher power is, I'm very proud of Woodstock. I don't want to take more credit than I deserve, but I do like to have the credit that the other guys, when they did Woodstock too, it's like all of a sudden, they hired PR people because it was Joel and John alone, and Michael wasn't even back with them. And then Michael sort of sold out and went back to them because that's what Michael does. He's not a record producer. He managed Kaka for a while, and Kaka fired him after 15 years for some reason, which I don't want to go into, a personal reason. And I just totally took Joe's side on that. And I love Michael. I love Michael. But Michael was a hippie head shop owner in Miami when I met him, and he brought an act to me at Capitol, and that's how we met. I only let him in because he came from the same neighborhood I did, and we became friends. And he sort of introduced me to a culture that I didn't know. Except my friends Rado and Ragney were writing hair, and I had a couple of artists that were in hair, that were friends of mine. Like Bert Summer was in hair. And, it was stupid to try to emulate. And right now, there's this concert in Europe, and they're talking to me, and I'm really thinking, do I really want to do it again? And because there's two people talking to me now that are going to do concerts next summer.
Oh, right.
And I think Michael may be planning something for Japan. I don't know. Because, I'd rather be one for one, Right now they're 1 for 3. I'm 1 for 1. It's a better batting average.
So looking ahead, what will be keeping you busy this year? What's on the schedule?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of hard not to take one of these offers to take over the promotion and marketing of one of these Woodstocks, because since I'm the one that created the original feeling, and I think the times are so much like it. In fact, with this kid group I just cut, and they're wonderful. and I wrote one song called "Oh No, What Have They Done," which, because I asked them, because I worked with them for a year before I even took them in the studio, and then I said, you don't write anything protesting what's happening to your generation right now. I said, would you do me a favor? And they wrote a couple of lines, and I finished it, and it was called "Oh No, What Have They Done?" And it's a protest song. And I'll probably get sued because I started with the Eve of Destruction by Barry McGuire. I added scratches and played 1,000 times from Pro Tools, and I just use it for 2 bars. And then it goes into a song about when do we let freedom fall apart in the world. It's basically what it's about, with numbers on a chart. And that's sort of my way of, it's sort of my Woodstock too, is to come back at this age and say, well, I want to go out like I started as a writer and a producer, and just help people and make a living, because I already did all that other stuff, and the fancy cars and the big apartments and stuff, they just don't do it. They don't fix anything, and the recognition doesn't fix anything. It's an inside job, and it took me many years to live at peace with Woodstock. It's an inside job, and I'm at peace with it now.
Yeah. So it's the full circle, back doing what you were doing initially.
Yeah, and I just may do this one in Yugoslavia because they already have Metallica. They have 10 incredible acts. They'll definitely have 500,000 people. And if I do go over, I can tell them the tricks and the key on how to get into people's souls and get them there in a peaceful state of mind, because I'm blessed to know how to do that. That's why I was successful as a songwriter. My songs are all message, upbeat songs, with hope. So it's I'm tempted. So I have been communicating, They first approached me, could you get us the Chili Peppers? We'll pay you a fee. And I said, no, I'm not for sale, to get you the Chili Peppers. I can get them for you. Go to Michael Lang. That's more his bag. If you want an event that makes history in Europe, then come back to me, and we'll talk. And actually, they responded, because when I really rushed back from Philadelphia so I could be here to do this conversation with you, and I just got in about an hour and a half ago, and I sounded sort of, from being in the studio, I sounded more like Wolfman Jack, so I drank a lot of coffee and tried to clear my voice up so I could actually speak, because after 15 hours in a row at 64 years old with, mixing 20-year-old music, I was almost dead. I'm awake now. I'm wide awake now. I want to go in the studio and cut a couple of sides with the la-di-das, bring them back.
There's one of them still going around down here too.
Really?
Yeah, the lead guitarist Kevin Borich is still going strong down here, yeah.
I've never met them. I don't know. Somehow they picked up on... I did the first version when I toured with Sonny and Cher on the I Got You, Babe. It was a demo, the Pied Piper that I did on a session. I was producing an act for Mercury, and I had a half hour left, and my band is Huma Crack, and Steve Gads, Tony Levin, Kenny Asher played piano on Bridge Over Troubled Waters, and my singers were Melba Moore and Valerie, Valerie Simpson and Minnie Riperton. That was my background singers, and it's sort of fun, back in the studio. But I still have the urge to do that one more concert that I waited 37 years for, and I've had offers every year. And there was one concert where I actually wasn't even there, and they said hosted by Woodstock creator Artie Kornfeld, and they drew 20,000 people, and it was real peaceful. And, they had that picture of me and Hendrix on stage at Woodstock on their poster.
Oh, wow.
And that's the one that was held on Yazga's actual farm.
Oh, yeah, yep.
And then I sort of got that Robin Hood reputation of the four, because when the rich guy, Gary, the guy who owns all the cable systems in upstate New York, decided to buy all the land around and build the Bethel Performing Arts Center, the Woodstock Preservation Alliance contacted me, and I made this scathing remark that they wanted to play for the town council, and at the meeting when they were going to decide whether to give these people the right to build on the Woodstock site. And somehow whatever I said got out on the underground, and it was like 170,000 hits on computers all over the world to the people that put it out, and it sort of stopped them from building on the field. And they did leave, X number of acres open, and they took away paid parking just to go and look at the monument. They wanted to take the monument away, and I just fought for it because I thought it should be a hallowed ground. And I actually put down Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, which hurt me because, Neil paid me very well to market Rocket in the Free World, and the Freedom album and the Harvest Moon album, and I called all the shots. And him and Elliot Roberts, his manager, trusted me totally. And I said, how could Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young go back and play the Bethel Performing Arts Society when they really happened because they were friends, and Michael had put on the loudspeaker, and everybody who came to Woodstock early in the first day, all we were playing was that first album, Crosby, Stills and Nash. And I thought it was poor taste, and I love Graham Nash. He's a gentleman, and I've known him since he's 16, and he's really a good man. I hated to write it, but I just had to put it out on the net that I was sort of disappointed that they actually went and played there, where to the place that commercialized, Woodstock. I didn't like it. I fought it. I fought it like I would fight, a war breaking out. I just thought it wasn't right. So many people, wanted that place to be sacred.
Well, Artie, I could go on talking to you all day, but I've unfortunately run out of time here. But thanks so much for your time and for your.
Yeah, I hope your dry spell goes away.
So do we. It's getting quite serious, actually.
I know, because I lived in Malibu and I was there for the fires and the earthquakes and the mudslides, and I was out there for a long time in LA for 20 years, so I went through all that, and I just came back from something I couldn't take because I'd been living in Florida for the last 7 years, and I just came getting out of the studio at 4 in the morning with a minus 10 wind chill factor, and with the cold and the flu, and you still have to get the work done.
Yeah.
Because the kids are counting on you, and it's more like when people say, "What do you do?" I say I play the players, and I love playing the players because they have the great minds and it's fun to play with them, and that's what this interview is like.
Yeah.
Playing the players.
Playing the players. Okay, Artie, thanks again. Take good care of yourself.
Hey, peace, love, and kick 'em and you know where if they're getting your way.
That's a nice finish.
Yeah, I love you guys.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Yeah, thanks for your political stance in the world, Australia. I like it.
We do what we can.
I know. Take care.
Okay, thanks, Artie.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.